We're back here at the Wanamaker Tulsa Arms Show with Jim Sapika, director of the NRA National Firearms Museum, and Steve Fiesta. The Blue Book of Gun Values is all you need to say in that name, and everyone knows this man. So thanks for sticking around with us. I was hoping, Jim, to have Steve chat a little bit about the opening of the Peterson Gallery at the National Firearms Museum. I was there covering it, and I saw Steve there, and it was an amazing event and an unbelievable collection there, and I was hoping to chat with him about that a little bit.
Well, the new Robert E. Peterson Gallery at the National Firearms Museum is the most amazing one room of guns I have ever seen in my life. There is nothing else like it. I mean, from pistols to rifles to shotguns, the quality, the rarity. I mean, that Borchardt that he had, did you look at the holster on that thing? It looked like it was made yesterday. Yeah. It's just, I mean, here's a guy that really did it right. And, you know, when Peterson was alive, and I knew him a little bit, he never really considered himself a collector. I mean, he actually thought he was going to shoot every last one of these guns. And, you know, that's why he kept buying them.
Including the Gatling gun.
Yeah. And he actually, that's what you talked about when he came to a trade show. You talked to him about shooting and hunting, or he wasn't that interested in talking about collecting. He wasn't interested about seeing the value of his guns. It didn't make any difference on the value of his guns. The guy was a bazillionaire, you know. So I'm really, really glad that the National Firearms Museum got the collection, because it's the best single collection on the planet, and it's where it should be. And more importantly, when anybody comes to Fairfax, it's just unbelievable. And thankfully for the National Rifle Association, what it does for the organization is that for the museum, Jim is not going to have a very tough time convincing people that if they want to give their guns to the museum, they can find an adequate home for them, because this is sensational.
Well, Steve, of the 5,000 guns that are in the museum's collection, there have only been 5 that have been purchased, and everything else has been donated over a 75-year period. And you know, there are many, many fine guns. They're some of the finest and most historic guns, and people know we have that long-term commitment to preserving America's firearms heritage and to educating future generations about it. So it's a good home for guns when somebody wants to see them preserved for posterity.
And Steve, you mentioned how great it is that the collection is there at the National Firearms Museum, because it's been great to watch that museum grow and evolve into the premier organization it is. I mean, and you talk about the big feather in the cap. That collection is just, I'm talking with you, Jim, and Phil around this whole thing. You can tell there's just that excitement. It's just, what's in that room is just, it's unbelievable.
I never saw the collection when I was in Peterson's house. He had it downstairs. Jim, were you there? Did you ever see it?
I got to see some of it, but it was around different places too, so you never saw it all in one place.
He never really talked about the stuff that he had.
Yeah.
You know, he always was going on to his new, acquisition. And I mean, there's some funny stories about Peterson, in that, you know, once he bought something, then that was kind of in the rearview mirror. You know, he was on to the next purchase. And sometimes he'd buy a gun like a couple years ahead of time. It had to be made, and he'd pay for it. And then 2 years later, a gun got ready, and he thought he hadn't paid for it. He was going to pay for it twice. Seriously. That happened with a Wesley Richards double rifle. He was going to pay for it again, and Mr. Peterson, we're sorry, we don't want your money. You paid for this 2 years ago.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for no thanks. There's some other stories about him wanting to talk about when he wanted something. It wasn't up to collecting. When he wanted a firearm, he wanted it, and he went after it, and put together a phenomenal collection.
Well, that's why Peterson was really good for the firearms community industry overall. I mean, he certainly represented the high end of the marketplace. He had the wherewithal, but Mr. Peterson, again, was not an investor. You know, he was primarily a shooter and a hunter, and he bought this stuff. If every gun he bought would have been zero value at the end of his lifetime, he couldn't have cared less. You know, that just wasn't, he had enough money, so that was just a small portion of his assets. But he raised the level of gun manufacturing, that a lot of the guns that were built for him were custom made, and he was, I think, fortunate enough to have the vision to give the engravers carte blanche on what they could do. I mean, do what you want to do. Maybe a dog on this side, a pheasant on this side. We'll see you in 2 years. Oh, by the way, here's 150,000.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you know, people talk about the great firearms engraving of the 19th century.
Yes.
But really, the greatest firearms engravers that have ever lived are alive and working today.
They're ticking away today as we speak, and you know, there's been a renaissance in firearms engraving from about 1960 forward that was almost a lost art. There are only a few people that were, you know, Elvin White was kind of like the last guy, and you know, he had a stroke for a while, so he was kind of out of commission for a while. But now, in our new book coming up, American Engravers, that will be published in December, we have 41 of America's greatest engravers, and it's just phenomenal what they can do. And it's not just guns, you know, it's anything from spurs to jewelry to watches to saddles to firearms to locks. It's amazing. You're right, Jim. We've never lived in a better time for the art of engraving.
Well, and you've been putting out some beautiful books on engravers over the past few years, so it's out there for everybody to enjoy. But talk to us a little bit about the Bulino engraving technique and some of the masterworks that you're seeing in that, because that amazes me when I see one of those.
I've watched them do it in their studio. I still don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch these guys. Bulino engraving, what Jim's talking about here, is rather than a hammer and chisel, you know, ticking it around and removing metal, what these guys do, they use a burin. It's a sharp little tool, and when I go to their places in Italy, you can hear them go pop, 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 pop. And what they do, they take this burin and they either scratch or punch dots into the metal. When you do that, the deeper the dot is, the more it traps the light. So they can take a shiny piece of metal, and when they get done with it, punching a million dots into it, number one, they can take a shiny piece of metal and turn it pitch black. I mean pitch black, and there's no paint on it. That's all done by Bulino engraving. Plus they can achieve amazing detail on what they do. In our Fracassi book, some guy had a Patek Philippe watch that at the bottom of the case, he wanted it engraved, and he wanted an American Eagle on it. And we took this American Eagle and we blew it up to 17 inches. And when it got up to this size in the book, you could see the eagle's eyes, the pupil, and the reflection in it. And that's after maybe, who knows, a million dots or something like that. But it's amazing technique. A lot of Americans actually don't like the technique because you have to kind of get it in the right. It's kind of hard to see, Jim. But if it's there, and you have some guns from Peterson's.
Oh, they're fantastic.
Yeah, some of the Pedretti guns, and the way you lit them, and the way you have the magnifying glasses from them. Anybody who goes to the museum can see exactly what you're talking about. And that, by the way, it's never been done before. It's done in the museum. The way those guns are exhibited, the shotguns, and the way they're presented. It's unbelievable. The viewer gets to see exactly what it takes to do that. It's very expensive, it's time consuming, but and it's Italian, but these guys are good.
They're incredible. I got a plug too. You can see them now at nramuseum.com, and the website guys have put this incredible photo viewer on there where you can pull up that engraving, and then you can zoom in. You can take picture that size, you can take area that size and blow it up, and you can get right down into the individual dots. It's an exceptional viewer and a wonderful, wonderful feature on the website.
I would encourage anybody who's interested in engraving to take a look at that, because, you know, when you look at this stuff under a 20x or 40x or 50x magnification, it looks like kind of like a canyon or something. It doesn't look like engraving at all. And then all of a sudden, a 20x, a 10x, oh, there's a dog. And then, you know, you take the loop off. I don't know how they can do it. I really don't.
Steve, thank you for coming out. We appreciate it. Love to have you on the Curator. Love to have you on the Curator.
When I grow up, I want to be just like Jim.
Me too.
I just want to grow up.
Don't do that.
Yeah, okay.
Don't do that.